You know it's this. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowing like sis. Did it perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look up better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheaper again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the 8th part of What If Naruto Enters Winxclub. Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of Pixel's Fanbook on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Magic Universe Magix. Sunday night. Trix dorm, Cloud Tower Magix. The scene plays out as we see that we were at Cloud Tower, in the Trix's dorm room. Their balcony door was open, letting in the moonlight into their room as a strange bird-like creature flies into the room and lands on their second-level railing. It looks at them as they were conjuring their magic together for some sort of ritual as it crows and flies out of the dorm through the open balcony into the night. The Trix continue conjuring their magic together, with some difficulty as they struggle a bit. How much longer do we need to do this? Stormy yells, gritting her teeth as she struggles in containing her overflowing pulse of magical flow. Icy wasn't doing well either as she looked like she was getting physically hurt by this. Focus, sister. We have to use everything we have in order to get Bloom's powers and transfer them to us. Then, we can do whatever we seek. Icy shouts, adding in more power to the ritual. The Trix add in more power to the ritual to the point where they summoned their vacuums for that added power. Once they had summoned them, a bright flash went off and an explosion went off in their dorm room, rocking the section of the tower. In the dorm room, dust starts to clear away as we see the Trix, lying on the floor as they were recuperating from the explosion. They look around to see their destroyed room, but they weren't worried about that. No, they were worried about something else entirely. Did it work? Darcy asks, looking around the room in search of something. Icy was too until she hears a growl behind them. They turn and see a small gray gremlin-like creature with glowing red eyes and mouth. They see it climb up on a pillar to the second floor as it phases through the floor, climb up on the railing of the second floor, and start crawling toward the open balcony as it reached said balcony before jumping out of it. I believe so. Icy says after seeing what had just left. Horrifying nightmares, specially designed to enter the dreams of the selected sleeper and deliver mind-shattering nightmares onto them. She yells with glee as she and her sisters start laughing. For they could imagine what horrors wait for their enemies. Underground tunnels under Alfea Magix. At Alfea, things were calm as they could be. The WinxClub were walking through the tunnels under the school after arriving back from the city from a day of hanging out and celebrating. The reason why they were in the city was to celebrate as the girls had gotten A's from Professor Wizgiz's class after he assigned them a secret test in which the students were given letters in what they thought contained answers to the test but in reality were nothing more but traps. Should you had opened one, and fortunately for the girls, they were the only ones who didn't and passed the class. They spent the day at the cafe and at the movies and they were exhausted from all the activities. The parent-teacher meetings are coming up really soon. Bloom says, discussing upcoming events the school participates in. Time sure has gone by, huh? She asks. Yeah, it'll be nice to see my parents again. Not fighting for once even. Stella says, smiling but could only hope that they wouldn't fight when they arrived like last year. Musa huffs at the mention of the day. Together or not, at least you get to see your parents. All these days just remind me that I don't have the fortune in seeing mine. Musa says, looking down as she knew that her father wasn't coming to the day due to an upcoming festival in another realm while she would see all the other students with their mothers, and that was a sight she was envious of. Naruto sees this and wraps his arm around Musa's shoulder and pulls her in for a one-arm hug as they walked. Hey, don't be sad about that, Musa. You've got us now, and we will be by your side always. Naruto says, smiling at her as Musa felt a lot better from the embrace and words of Naruto as she hugs back. Thanks, Naruto. Musa says. It's no problem. Naruto says as he looks up to the ceiling in thought. But it's kind of hard to believe that 5 months have passed since that ever night we all met. Who would have thought that we'd be this close during all that time? He says, reminiscing back to the night they all informally met. After all the things we've gone through. School, various attacks from nature, the tricks, and all the drama. How we won't grow close together after all that. Stella says, with the girls and Naruto agreeing to what she said. True. So true. Naruto says, nodding. Flora then senses something. Flora hums, frowning as she looks around, looking at the vines in the tunnel. Tecna sees the expression Flora was making and gets curious. Is something wrong, Flora? Tenka asks, making everyone else turn and see Flora's expression. I feel something very wrong. It's Mother Nature, it's like something was upsetting her. Flora says, she could the distress of nature nearby. Really? Bloom asks and Flora nods. Yes, it's as if she's trying to warn me about something. Something sinister lurking around the forests. Flora says. Do you think it's the tricks? Stella asks. It was understandable as the tricks had snuck onto campus before and the last time they did, 2 of them nearly died that night. Naruto shakes his head. Nope, it can't be them. If it were them, I'd feel them immediately since I know what their magical presence feels like and I'm not sensing them at all. Naruto says, focusing his sensing ability in finding no traces of the tricks anywhere. Then, what could it be? Musa asks, Naruto frowns. I have no clue. Naruto says, frowning as he did sense something in the range around Althea. It was small, so small that he could barely feel it, and it was moving around too much that he couldn't get a lock on whatever it was. What is that? Naruto thought, frowning. Eventually, the group makes it to Naruto's cave entrance, where he stops at the door. Well, this is my stop. I'll be seeing you girls later. Naruto says, stretching his arms and yawning as he felt his exhaustion kicking in. Night girls. He says, waving to them. Night Naruto/good night. The girls say, waving good night to him. He opens his door and processes into his cave to go and turn in for the night. The girls resume their walk through the tunnel to the ladder that led into their dorm, but as they walked, Tenka hears something behind her, causing her to stop and turn around to see what was, but to her surprise, she saw nothing. Hold on, did you hear that? Tecna asks. The other girls stop and turn back to her with raised eyebrows. Hear what? Musa asks. That rattling noise. Tecna says, but they didn't hear anything. No, I didn't hear anything. Maybe it was your imagination, Tecna. Bloom says. She and the rest resumed their walk down the tunnel while Tecna just stood there, looking around with narrow eyes. Yeah, maybe. Tecna says before she slowly walks, catching up to the others. Eventually, they make it to the ladder and process and climb up to the hatch of their dorm and enter the dorm. Bloom was the last one to enter through the hatch and closes it. Stella lets out a rather loud and long yawn while stretching her arms in the air. Man, am I exhausted. Stella says, after finishing yawning with an expression of exhaustion coming onto her face. I'm going to bed. She says and Bloom agrees with her. Yeah, we should all head to bed. Bloom says as the others agree. She lets out a yawn and covers her hand over her mouth as it stops and looks at others. Night everyone. She says. Night. The others say before heading off to their respective bedrooms, to turn in for the night and rest for the new day. A few hours later. Some hours pass and we see Stella in her large bed, fast asleep. She slept but she suddenly starts to get a bit rowdy and restless in her sleep while starting to breathe and sweat slightly. Unaware of her, something phases through the wall into her room and crawls on the walls before going to Stella's bed and hops onto it, looking at her. It was the same gray gremlin-like creature the Tricks had summoned back at their dorm at Cloud Tower. It stares at Stella's sleeping face as it lets out a nasty hiss before narrowing its eyes as they glow profoundly at Stella, causing her to get restless once now. Stella's dream. In the mind that was Stella's, we see her floating in the middle of an empty void, looking around for something in it when she spots something in the distance. She floats her way toward this object, and when she reaches it, she sees it was a large mirror. Not one to shy away the moment to see herself in a mirror, Stella looks at it and admires herself, striking a few poses here and there. But the mirror wraps and the reflection of Stella is replaced by a young girl with blonde hair. The same shade of blonde her hair was, but the girl's hair was slightly messy. She wore a jungle green vest top with a golden S on the left side of the vest, with a pale beige skirt and dark green RBB boots. She also had on a jungle green headband, keeping her hair in place, and wore light blue framed glasses. Stella gasps at seeing this girl in the mirror. She looks at the girl's face and sees the girl was crying and looks depressed as she realizes that the girl in the mirror was her when she was younger. Stella slowly reaches for the mirror, and when her fingertips touch the mirror, it shattered and implodes, sending the shards all over the place and forcing Stella to cover herself with her arms as she is sent back from the implosion. After stopping back in the middle of the void, Stella lowered her arms and winced as she felt the pain coming from them. She looks down and sees she was cut up on her forearms and had some shards stabbing into her. But before she could do anything about this, a large flash comes into the void, over her as she covers her eyes from the bright light, but it dissipates a bit and Stella looks up to see what was responsible for the flash, and her eyes widen at seeing the sun and moon in the air above her. The sun and moon lower down and face her as they start to change into two different things. Stella narrows her eyes at the two changing stars, but they widen at seeing two people she never together again. In the place of the moon, was an older woman with dark blue eyes, and long pale blonde hair, pulled back into a ponytail with lighter blonde streaks in her hair. She wore makeup that didn't interrupt her natural beauty. She had on light blue eyeliner and pink lipstick. She wore a crescent-shaped tiara and wore a long blue dress with a dark blue cape. And in the place of the sun, was a fit man who had orange-colored hair and orange eyes. He had a short boxed beard and, like Stella, had a sight tan complexion. He wore a golden crown, and at the center of it, was a smaller pattern of the crown in a light orange color. He wore a golden short breastplate with shoulder plates. Atop the breastplate was a collar plate that extended upward and encircled his neck area. There was an orange star pattern, shaped like the Christmas star, and was located at the center of his breastplate. He wore a short, ivory kaftan where its sleeves were long and tight, and was red on the upper parts of his sleeves. An orange cloth was tied to his waist and he wore red pants. And ivory knee-length boots where the soles were outlined with a tan border. Stella gasps, not believing what she was seeing in front of her. These two people who appeared in front of her were her parents. They were staring at her as she was in shock. Mother? Father? Stella utters, not knowing that tears were building up in her eyes. She slowly reaches for them, wanting to hug them, but even before she could get to them, they turn back into the sun and moon they were previously, and both stars suddenly die, and the light in the void goes away, leaving Stella floating in it. She looks around for her parents, but she could only see the darkness around her as it starts to creep at her, wrapping around her body and altering her, and tries to fight it back, but nothing seemed to work as the darkness made its way up to her head and as it was about to fully wrap around her face. End Stella's dream. Stella gasps as she wakes up, jolting up from her bed and letting out a loud scream. Ah! Stella screams, altering the others from their rooms and rushing over to hers, missing something that was clawing on top of the ceiling and exiting the room. Everyone gathers around Stella's bed as they see her frantically panting, trying to catch her breath while sweating profoundly and looking visibly shaken. Bloom steadily approaches her and places her hand on her shoulder. Stella! Stella! Bloom yells, calling out to the blonde, hoping to break her out of this state. Stella! What happened? Why were you screaming? She asks. And seemingly, it worked as Stella blinks and looks around, taking in her surroundings before turning to the others. I don't know. I was dreaming and I had a nightmare. Stella utters, still looking shaken up by whatever she dreamt, causing the others to look at her with concern. Oh, Stella, you poor thing. Flora says, walking up to the bed before sitting on it and placing her hand on Stella's forehead, feeling the heat and sweat from it. She looks at Stella. Do you remember what it was about? She asks. Stella looks at her and looked lost. No, I don't, but it felt more than just a nightmare, it felt like someone was watching me. Stella says. Tekna looks at the others. I've said it before. There's something wrong tonight. Tekna says as the others look at her, remembering what she said earlier. Bloom feels something touch her hand and she looks down to see what it was and gasps in horror. Stella, your arms. Bloom says, causing the others to look at what she was looking at, and saw Stella's arms were cut up with long lines on her forearms with blood seeping from the cuts and onto her bed cover. There are cuts on them. She says. Stella looks at her arms in shock, horror, and confusion. What happened? Musa asks as Stella was lost. I don't know. I honestly don't know. Stella utters, looking at her arms. The others look at her with concern, wondering what had happened to her. Bloom places her hand on Stella's shoulder. Come on, let's get you to the nurse's office and get you treated. Bloom says. Stella looks at her and nods. With the help of Bloom and Flora, they get Stella out of her bed and they were about to lead her out of the room when out of nowhere, Stella falls to the floor, startling the others. Stella. Bloom yells, crouching down to Stella who sits up. Stella, what happened? She asks. Stella looks up with a confused expression. I don't know, I feel tired all of a sudden. Like, my energy's been sucked from me. Stella says, looking as drained as she stated. Come on, we need to get you to the nurse's office. Bloom says. She and Flora help Stella back up on her feet while holding her by her shoulders to stabilize her as they exit the room and out of the dorm and walk to the nurse's office. Back at Stella's room, Tekna and Musa remained as Musa was looking at the blood-stained sheets. Man, I hope Stella will be okay. Musa says, worried about her friend. Tekna narrows her eyes. Again, I'm saying that there's something really wrong here. First, Flora sensed something wrong, then me hearing rattling noises earlier. I can feel it, something's wrong. Tekna says. Musa just shrugs her shoulders. Whatever, we've got classes in the morning. I'm going back to sleep. Musa says as she stands up from the bed and walks out of the room. Tekna stays in the room for a bit before getting up herself and walks out of the room and returns to her room and heads back into her bed. Outside their room, something crawls toward their door, passing the table in the lounge where the pumpkin Mirta rested. As this thing bumps into one of the table's legs, shaking the table. The pumpkin suddenly opens her eyes and sees this thing, causing her to gain wide eyes as the thing phases through the wall and into the room. This thing crawls into the room, passing Tekna as it sets its glowing eyes on Musa. It moves toward her bed and hops onto it, being on top of her, and stares at her as she moves unintentionally facing it. This creature was a wolf-shaped porcupine with glowing red eyes as it snarls at Musa and its eyes glow profoundly, causing Musa to become a bit restless in her sleep as sweat being to form her head. Musa's dream. In Musa's dream, we see her jogging down a path inside the forest around Alfea, listening to music with the use of headphones. She jogs down the path before she turns a corner and she stops as she sees that she was suddenly back home, on Melody, but she sensed something wrong. She looks around and saw that the city was destroyed, buildings in ruins and heavily damaged, and the streets were filled with various litter. Musa looks around as she processes taking off her headphones, looking around in shock at seeing the state her homeworld was in. As she was walking around, she soon spots someone a bit further down the street she was on. She narrows her eyes in focus at who was this person and sees them sitting by a bus stop. She walks toward the bus stop to get a better look at this person, and once she reaches the stop, Musa freezes in shock at seeing who this person was. It was her mother, in rags, looking exhausted and injured as she had a wound on her chest. Musa tries to call out to her, but for some reason, no noise came out from her mouth. She tires and tires, but nothing came, not even the faintest of whispers. Seeing as she had no choice, Musa starts running toward her mother, but it seemed to her that she ran an eternity, as with each step she took, the further her mother seemed to be getting, all the while trying to call out to her, but again, nothing came out. But once Musa finally reached the bus stop, to her surprise and horror, her mother had vanished, only leaving a pool of blood on the bench and floor. Musa looks around for her, seeing where she could be as the buildings start to crumble as the world started to not only lose light, but all sound as well. Musa tries to call out, but once again, couldn't due to no noise coming from her mouth. She grabbed her neck as she looked like she was struggling to breathe. As the world continues to crumble around and the light begins to fade away, Musa tries to scream, but nothing came out of her mouth. Mom! Dad! Girls! Musa thought, desperately trying to call out to anyone for help. Nothing came, and as the darkness and crumbling were reaching her, she looks up and thinks of one last person for help. Naruto! Musa thought, as the darkness finally takes over her as she closes her eyes. End Musa's dream. Musa falls out of her bed and lays on the floor, motionless and looking pale as the creature that hovered over her hisses as it changes forms from the wolf-shaped porcupine it was into a monstrous version of a spider but with one red glowing eye. It turns its attention from Musa and onto Tekna, who was moving around in her bed. It crawls on the ceiling over to her bed as she turns once more, looking up as the creature lowers its head down at her and opens its mouth, emulating a red glow down at her face, which causes Tekna to become restless as sweat begins to form. Tekna's dream. In Tekna's dream, several numbers and equations fall down onto the floor of a dark void as screams. The numbers and equations wrap around Tekna, trapping her whole body as she tries to fight out of them but with no effect as she screams and struggles to breathe even. The trap takes her somewhere before releasing her in the air as she falls from high in the air before crashing into the ground. Laying in a crater, Tekna slowly emerges from it as she looks injured from the fall. She looks around and sees that she was in Magix, but it was much different from what we've seen. It looked like a computer-run simulation of Magix but on low res, as the buildings and trees were all blocky and glitchy in some areas. She looks around the city a bit further and sees someone in front of her, standing in place and glitching. She stands up and was about to go to them when this person vanishes into pixel particles, leaving Tekna there, standing on the road with a stunned and confused expression. But as she was about to look for them, she jolts as she felt a massive surge of sharp pain coming from her abdomen. She looks down and was in shock and horror as she sees a blade piercing through her chest, with a corruption forming around the stab wound. She looks behind to see what was stabbing through her, and her eyes widen further as her shock intensifies at seeing who was the one holding the blade stabbing into her. It was Naruto, but this Naruto wasn't the one she had gotten to know these past few months. No, this Naruto looked corrupted, as his eyes were dark with irises dark blue, and his whisker marks were dark. He has a sinister smile to him which sends a chill down Tekna as blood begins to leak from her mouth, black blood, as this Naruto twists the blade around, causing Tekna to scream in agony before he takes the blade out from Tekna's cheek, allowing the black blood to gush out from her wound and splatter onto the floor as she tries to hold the wound and stop the blood from leaking out. She looks back to Naruto and sees him standing over her, sinisterly smiling as he holds his blade up in the air, blood dripping down the metal as it sparks into flames as he looks down at her, eyes glowing menacingly. Tekna starts trying to beg this Naruto trying to not do this, but there was a feeling of dread creeping into her, this feeling of uselessness as she couldn't do a thing in stopping this Naruto from killing her, and just as he sends the blade down to her. End Tekna's dream. Tekna's eyes shoot open as she jolts up from her bed and grabs her chest, panting heavily and sweating heavily. She looked visibly shaken from what had just happened. It felt too real, everything about, she felt it all. From the pain to the feeling of loneliness to the fear and to nothing, and that last part scared her terribly. That feeling was still lingering in her mind. She was so in her own world that she misses something large phase through the wall beside her, and only did it leave the room, she looks around and notices Musa on the floor, lying motionless. Musa? Are you alright? Tekna calls out to Musa, after calming herself down for a bit as she looks at Musa who wasn't responding to her. Sensing that something was wrong with Musa, she gets out of her bed and walks over to Musa, and knees down to her, shaking her gently. Musa. 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 Tekna was speaking softly, but after a bit and still no response from Musa, Tekna was getting worried and starts frantically shaking Musa's body as she takes notice that Musa looked very pale. Tekna also takes notice of how Musa wasn't breathing. Tekna placed 2 of her fingers onto Musa's neck and checks her pulse and was horrified in feeling it was low. She quickly jumps into action and puts Musa fully back into her bed and starts performing CRP on Musa, trying to resuscitate her. And after a few chest compressions and a bit of mouth-to-mouth, Musa finally opens her eyes. Gasp. Musa lets out a loud gasp before she starts to cough and take in deep breaths as Tekna looks at her, with a concerned expression. After a while, Musa finally calms down and regains her breathing once more. Musa, are you okay? Tekna asks, checking on Musa, thinking that there could be something wrong. Musa looks up at her and had the same look of confusion and loss that Stella had earlier. Why yeah. Musa says, but it sounded like she was unsure about that. What happened? She asks. I don't know. All I know is that I woke up and looked at you, you were out of your bed and I called out to you but you didn't respond. Feeling something was wrong, I went to you and saw that you looked pale and stopped breathing, so I started doing CPR on you while shaking you awake. Tekna says. She could see Musa was shaken and had to ask. What were you dreaming? She asks. Musa looks down and tries to recollect what she dreamt, but I don't know, I don't remember, all I feel is empty. Musa says, and that had Tekna worried. It was similar to what Stella had experienced. The door to their room opens and Bloom, Flora, and Stella walk in. Stella had bandages wrapped on her forearms. Tekna, Musa. Is everything alright? We heard a scream. Bloom asks, walking up to the 2 as Tekna looks at her and shakes her head. No. I was woken up by Musa and saw something was wrong with her. She looked like she was struggling to breathe and was out of her bed and she passed out. I went to her and saw that she wasn't breathing and started to do CPR on her while shaking her awake. She did, but she looked lost and confused. I asked what happened and what she dreamt and she doesn't remember what it was. Tekna says as the 3 eyes widen in shock at hearing Musa was close to death's door as the musical fairy. The same thing that happened to me. Stella utters, going over to Musa and patting her on her back. And the thing was, I had a nightmare just before I woke up from it and, I don't remember a single thing from it, Tekna says, looking down to the floor and curling herself up into a ball as she hugs her legs close. What is going on here? Flora asks, wondering what was happening. I don't know, but something's defiantly going on here and it's not good. Something's wrong. Bloom says. But what? Flora asks and Bloom just looks at her with an uncertain expression. That's what we all like to know. Bloom says as they all sit/stand there in silence, trying to figure out what was happening to them. All the while in the lounge area, the pumpkin form of Mirta just looks on with concern as she spots the creature leaving the dorm, going to wherever it was going to after hearing the screams, and had an idea of what was happening. Several more hours later. Monday. The balcony of the Winx dorm Althea, Magix. So, let me get this straight. Naruto says, through Bloom's phone. She was outside of her dorm, standing on the balcony. She was talking to Naruto, who was at work in the city, and was talking about the events from the previous night. Stella, Musa, and Tekna, all had nightmares that caused them to scream, get hurt, choke, and were shaken up, and they only were able to wake up after you all started to hear them scream, suffer, or nearly die. He asks, recapping what he just listened to from Bloom. The Earth Fairy herself nods as she leans against the balcony. I know that it sounds crazy to hear, but that's the truth. Bloom says, she hears Naruto sigh from his end, only imagining the expression he could be having right now. Okay, that's weird. Naruto says, I know that some dreams feel so real that you think they were, but this is something else. He says, and Bloom couldn't help but agree with him. I know. Bloom says before sighing. This was something that was strange to them, and it was hurting them deeply. If something wasn't done regarding this, they might not ever recover. Are you sure that they were just dreams, nightmares? Whatever they are. Do you know if they remember them? Naruto asks. That's the issue here. Naruto, Stella, Musa, and Tekna have no memories of the dreams they had. All they do remember were being waked up by us and feeling empty and exhausted. Bloom says, remembering how lost and shaken up the three girls were when they were discovered after having their nightmares. She could tell that they were suffering. But you think this is something involving magic? She says, hoping that Naruto has the answer, but to her disappointment, she hears a sigh from him. Sorry Bloom, but I can't help you here. I'm not an expert in dreams or dream-related magic. Hell, I don't think that there is such magic. Naruto says. This causes Bloom to sigh from frustration at not having any answers. As if he could sense what Bloom was feeling, Naruto spoke again. But, tell you what, I'll look at some of the books in the library and even ask Granny if she knows anything after work. See if there's anything that could be related to this. And if I do find anything, I'll come up and help you girls out with this problem. He says, causing Bloom's hopes to pick back up. Really? Bloom asks and hears Naruto just chuckles. Yup, you're my friends, and if something happens to you guys, I'll do anything to stop it. That's the least I can do for you. Naruto says. Bloom couldn't help but smile at that, feeling grateful for his selflessness in helping her and the others in their time of need. And while she was happy, something inside her was disappointed by him saying that she was just his friend. Thanks, Naruto. Bloom says. No problem Bloomy Bloom. Naruto says. Just then, Bloom hears a commotion from Naruto's side, a loud voice calling his name in a panic. Oh, my boss is calling me, I've got to go. Hank, what's going on? He says, and just before he drops the call, Bloom hears an explosion go off from the other line as the call finally drops with a continuous beep. She looks at her phone with wide eyes, wondering what happened on his side. Hope that wasn't near him. Bloom says after a while as she puts her phone into her pocket and walks back into the dorm and into the lounge area where she sees the others, sitting on their chairs and couch. All except Flora still look as lost, empty, shaken up, and anxious as they were just hours prior. The others didn't pay any attention at seeing Bloom re-entering the room, but Flora did as she looks up from her book and sees the Earth Fairy. Enter. Bloom, did Naruto say anything? Flora asks, closing her book and placing it on the couch. He said that he doesn't know what this is, he's never heard of something like this or ever experienced anything like this before. He's as clueless as we are right now. Bloom says, causing the three to sigh in disappointment. That. Really? Flora asks with Bloom nodding only. Yeah, he did. And he's going to do it when he's off his work, and I hope he's fine since I think he might have blown up. Bloom says. What she said causes the others to look at her with confusion at hearing Naruto blowing up. Do we want to know? Musa asks as Bloom just shakes her head. I don't think we should. Bloom says. Tekna then sighs. I guess we should figure out just what's causing it. Tekna says. Yeah, 'cause things have been feeling really weird since last night. Stella says, standing up from her seat and placing her hands onto her hips, arms still with their bandages. Flora senses something wrong with nature, then Tekna hears noises we didn't hear in the tunnels, then Tekna, Musa, and I have nightmares that have hurt and almost killed us. Why is this happening and why at us? She asks as the others just looked as clueless as she was about this. I don't know. But I want to, since this is getting out of hand. Musa says, clenching her fists in anger. She was furious about her nightmare and it felt like a bad taste in her mouth. Flora feels something and looks around. Wait a minute. Flora says, the others see her looking around with narrow eyes as if she was looking for something. Flora does this for a bit before stopping and looking at the table where Mitra was on. Mirda, she says. Mirda? What does she have to do with any of things? Tekna asks. Out of nowhere, Kiko hops past them and climbs up onto the table with the use of the chair and is next to Pumpkin Mirda and starts patting her. Kiko, what's wrong? Bloom asks. I think Kiko is sensing what I'm sensing. Flora says as she walks over to the table with the others following her to see what was wrong. They stop near the table. He's trying to tell us something. And it has to do with Mirda. Right, Kiko? She asks, looking at the blue-furred bunny who nods and hops up and down. So, what is it? Bloom asks. Flora just looks at Mitra and seeing her eyes were looking at her as if she was telling her something. Only one way to find out. Flora says before lifting her hand up and aiming it at Mirda. She closes her eyes and starts concentrating on drawing out some of her magic and tries establishing a link with the pumpkin. After a few failed turns, Flora manages to establish a connection with Mirda and uses her magic to display a projection image of Mirda from her hand. The others gasp in awe and shock at seeing Mirda's projection. Mirda! The girls yell as the young witch looks at them with a smile. Oh, thank goodness you were able to contact me, Flora. Mirda says, smiling at Flora who looked relieved as she too smiles. It's so good to see you again, Mirda. And well too. Flora says and Mirda nods. Yeah, it's thanks to you taking care of me while you're looking for a way to break this curse on me. Mirda says. It's no problem. I promise you that I will find a way to revert you back to your normal self. Flora says with Mirda sincerely smiling at that. I know you will. Mirda says. Just then, Stella lets out a cough. Mirda, the situation we have. Don't you have anything regarding it? Stella says, causing the two to be sheepish as they forgot the task at hand. Oh right. Mirda says as she rubs the back of her head. She then gains a serious expression and looks at the Winx fairies. Listen up girls, something's been crawling around your dorm last night, going into our rooms and from what I've listened, giving you 3 night terrors. She says. Causing the others to be confused. Night terrors? Tekna asks. Yes, they're dreams that target the victim's worst trauma and fears and display them in their dreams, torturing them. And the worst part, it is a forbidden dark spell as it has killed people before. Mirda says, causing the fairies to have wide eyes. Dark magic? Musa utters, feeling shaken at the mention of there have been people who've died from this spell and she was close to being a part of that last night. Yes, only those who possess dark magic reserves can do this, and have to be powerful since it's a difficult spell to perform. Mirda says, as the fairies take in this information and couldn't help but think that this had to be related to Cloud Tower. What are this creature's weaknesses? Tekna asks, wanting to know what were the weaknesses, but she sees Mitra look at her with a frown. Sorry girls, but I have no clue what its weaknesses are. There aren't any records for its weaknesses recorded. Mirda says. This leaves the others disappointed. Great. Stella utters as she runs her hand down her face. Musa then took a moment to think about last night and realizes something. Wait, if it got me, Tenka, and Stella already. Then the next ones are Musa was saying as the others listen in on her and realize what she was saying and realize who was next to this creature. Me and Flora. Blue mutters. She and Flora look at one another with concern. Mirda unfortunately nods. Yes. Mirda says. You girls have to be careful with this thing. It grows after attacking and comes out bigger, scarier, and more powerful. It'd going to be hard to beat. She says as the girls nod, with serious expressions. We will. Bloom says. Good. Mirda says, but she then lets out a frustrated sigh. Man, I wish I could help you more than just this. She yells, feeling back that she couldn't help the Winx out more, but the girls just look at her with smiles. You've done more than we could have asked for. Thank you, Mirda. We really appreciate it. Flora says, feeling grateful for Mirda's help. No problem. Mirda says. She then looks down and rubs her arm. And she started to look a bit shy for some reason. Oh, and could you tell Naruto, the next time you see him, that I'm okay? I heard and saw what he did to himself after I got turned into this and I feel really terrible for making her upset. She says, causing the girls to smile at this, while some were thinking about her sudden shy behavior. Will do. Plus, it might make him happy and relieved to hear that. Bloom says. Mirda smiles and nods. Thank you, guys. Mitra says, she starts to fade away, signaling that the connection was ending. Good luck in beating this creature. She yells, waving the girls goodbye. We will. Thanks. The girls yell and see Mirda disappear back into her pumpkin form as she looks at them and closes her eyes in a way to show that she was smiling before looking back down, but with her eyes still closes, the girls assumed that she had fallen asleep. So, now we know what's causing the nightmares night terrors we've had last night. What do we do? Stella asks, looking at the others as Bloom turns to them with a serious expression. We prepare and wait for it to show up. Bloom says with the others looking at her and nod. Trix dorm, Cloud Tower Magix. Night. We cut to Cloud Tower, in the Trix's dorm as we see them in their witch outfits, sitting cross-legged on the floor and were laughing mincingly while the now monstrous spider-like dream monster was in their dorm, sitting on the floor next to its masters as it waits for its next order. I can't wait for tonight, sisters. Icy says, darkly grinning at the others who grin darkly. Yes, once we've tried out the other fairies. With those horrific night terrors Stormy says. It'll be easy for us to take out Bloom and take her power of ourselves. Darcy says, finishing Stormy's sentence. And she'll be in quite a treat when it's her turn. Icy says, laughing again as she could only imagine how broken Bloom would be after the night terror she'd have once their dream monster got to her, and then, how she'd look after they drained her powers out of her. And speaking about draining powers, she turns to the others, plus, I have a surprise for someone. One that's been a thrown in our asses for some time now. She says, causing the others to look at her. Who? Stormy asks, she took the time to think and she remembers the one person who hangs out with them. Naruto. Oh, that blonde guy that hangs around those fairies. She says and Icy nods. He's the only one who threatened us and lived. While I'd normally freeze people who dare cross us the wrong way, let alone threaten us. I need him alive, the same as Bloom will be. Icy says. Oh, is this about that dark hidden power you sensed coming from him on that day in Magix where you sensed that Bloom has the dragon flame? Stormy asks, remembering what Ivy said that very day, and the ice there which nods. Yes, it is. Icy says as she reminisces back to that something powerful, sinister, and menacing. Something that makes me all hot. All that power, she swoons, feeling all bothered by it as she grabs her arms and hugs herself. All that power, was something else when she barely felt it, it was addicting and toxic, and she wanted to feel it again. And she wasn't the only one. So, what do you think it is? Stormy asks. That's the issue here, sister, I have no clue what this power is. All I can feel is it's a large pool of dark, anger-filled energy and I want it. I want it for our plans. Icy yells, with a crazed expression on her face, wanting that power now. And we'll get it. Stormy yells, agreeing with her sister as the two speak more about Naruto's hidden power, unaware that Darcy looked furious about this. DMN, you icy. DMN, your icy soul. Darcy thought, with an enraged expression, gritting her teeth. She's going to take him for herself. Well, sister, I won't let that happen. I've already claimed him as my pet and I will see to it that he becomes it. And if you come in my way in claiming my pet, I won't hesitate in putting you down. She thought, darkly. Thinking about Naruto's hidden power and how it felt, she loved it and like Icy, wanted more. No one and I means, no one will be in the way of her pet, she'll make sure of it. Night. Winx dorm, Althea Magix. It was the middle of the night and things were as tense as you could imagine for our young fairies. In their rooms, all were in their bed but not sleeping like the rest of the school were, they were awake and were waiting for this dream monster to return so they could end it and be done with this. In the lounge, Kiko and Pumpkin Mirda were awake as well as they sensed a new presence entering the lounge. They look around and spot the spider-like dream monster phasing through the floor and crawling around the floor. The blue-furred bunny gets scared and hides behind Pumpkin Mirda whose eyes looked frightened at the sight as the monster hisses and goes into Bloom's and Flora's room, for its next prey as Mirda starts flashing brightly, pulsing her magic out for Flora to warn for the monster and hoping that she wasn't too late. Inside the room, the two girls were sleeping as the monster phases through the wall and crawled toward Flora's bed. It hovers over her and hisses as it was about to use its magic on her and enter her dream, but Flora senses the pulse coming from Mirda, signaling her that it's here. She jolts up from her bed and sees it, hissing and eyes glowing. Bloom. Here it is. Flora yells, waking up, but she quickly reacts and uses her magic on the bonsai tree next to her bed and makes its branches extend and wrap around the monster's body and mouth, but it quickly breaks the branches and escapes the room by phasing through the door. Flora and Bloom jump out of their beds and run to the door and open it to see the monster was at their hallways where the doors to their rooms were. They see the monster was large, barely touching the ceiling. The other girls woke up from the commotion and exit their rooms, only to stop and see what was in front of them. Whoa! That's a big monster. Musa yells, seeing what was causing her so much. It horrible to look at. Stella shudders at the sight. The girls look at one another and nod before looking back to the monster and Magic Winx yell as they transform into their fairy forms and ready for the fight. The monster lets out a piercing screech as it prepares for battle. Stella removes her ring and tosses it in the air. Solaria. Stella yells as the ring turns into its scepter form as she catches in and wields it. She then hits the monster with the top of the scepter by its leg, sending it back as it hits the wall by the entrance of the dorm. It shakes its head before looking at Stella and sending a blast from its mouth. Stella prepares a spell to block the attack when a sudden flash appears in front of her. It was a flash from her dream of her parents. Thanks to the distraction, Stella was unable to block or dodge the attack and gets hit by it in the chest, sending her flying back into the lounge area. Stella! The girls yell. Stella was on the floor and was moaning from the pain from the attack as the monster lets out another screech and phased through the wall leading outside of the dorm. Stella sits up and rubs her head. I'm fine. Stella says. The others sigh in relief at seeing Stella was alright as Bloom turns to the door and glares at it. Come on, let's tail that thing. Bloom says as she and the rest fly out of the dorm, giving chase to the monster. Flora stays behind and flies toward Mirda and check and see if she was alright. Pumpkin Mirda's eyes flash as the projection of Mirda pops out. Go Flora, don't worry about me. Who knows where this is heading next? Projection Mirda says, reassuring that she would be fine as Flora nods. Alright, Flora yells as she floats off the floor, I'll be back. She says before flying out of the room, to catch up with the others. She flies down the hallways and stairs in search of the girls and the monster as she hears commotion just ahead of her. She flies toward the commotion and sees Musa and Tenka on the floor, looking exhausted. Stella was on her knees, panting while Bloom was defending them with a magical shield as the monster was firing green blasts at them. Girls! What's wrong? She yells, landing behind them, and crouches down to the two downed girls to try and help them. I don't know, 1 minute, me and Tenka were about to use our magic for a combined attack, and the next thing we know, we feel drained. Musa says, sweating a bit and heavily panting. Tekna looked the same as she tries to pick herself up from the floor. I think, that monster drained our magic reserves and we haven't recovered enough to fight it seriously. Tekna says. Stella looks back at them and nods. Why yeah. Stella pants, still trying to catch her breath while starting to sweat a bit. Bloom continues to defend them against the monster as it continues to fire the green blasts at her shield, which started to cause Bloom to get strained from keeping it up, closing her eyes to focus. The monster continues firing as its eyes glow brightly at Bloom as she struggles to keep the shield up when all of a sudden, a flash appears in her mind. She sees her mother getting gunned down in her flower store by a couple of robbers robbing the place. She then sees her father getting trapped in a burning building in his firefighter suit as he was trying to escape. He tries to open the door when the building collapses onto him, crashing and killing him. The next thing she was are all her friends in the Winx were slayed by the tricks who laugh and were sitting on thrones as all of Magix was in ruins by something as Icy held the decapitated head of Faragonda as she laughs sinisterly, and the final thing she sees was Naruto, all bruised and injured while missing an eye and arm as he lifts his remaining hand at her right before a sword stabs right through his chest and his hand falls down to the floor and he goes limp. She looks at who killed him and is shocked at the sight. It was her, but this version of her looked nothing like she was right now. This Bloom did look like her but was different in a lot of ways. She wore dark violet makeup, dark violet eyeshadow and lipstick, and her outfit was similar to her normal Winx outfit but it was in dark black navy blue instead of the usual cyan. Her tiara was silver instead of golden and pointed, and the brooch on her shirt was a diamond-shaped dark purple one. Her hair was thicker, messier, and a darker shade of red while her wings were more pointed and sliver with gray tips. The more striking feature that made her different from the Bloom we knew was her eyes. Her irises were golden yellow in color from the usual blues she was known for, and her pupils were silted to those of a cat's, or dragon. This Bloom had a dark smirk as she looks at Bloom and launches at her with the sword she killed Naruto with as Bloom's eyes shot open as she was back in reality. No! Bloom yells, waking up from the vision she witnessed as the monster fires another blast at her shield, shattering it and hitting her, sending her flying back and hitting the floor hard. Bloom! The girls yell at seeing her hit the ground. The monster hisses before phasing through the floor as Stella gets up and flies toward Bloom as the Earth Fairy was getting back up. Bloom, are you okay? Stella asks, helping Bloom step up as the red hair nods and rubs her bottom. I am fine. Bloom says. She looks around and sees no sign of the monster. Where's the monster? Where did it go? She asks while Flora was helping Tekna and Musa help to their feet. I think it went downstairs. Flora says and Bloom nods. Okay, let's go and find it. Bloom says. Naruto's room, tunnels under Althea Magix. At the time when the monster escaped from the Winx. Man, I am pooped. Naruto yawns as he stretches his arms out. He was at his desk, looking at the books he got from the library that related to dreams, as he did promise Bloom that he'd help her and the others out with their dream problem, and so far he found nothing that was related or spoke about the problem. He did find a spell that allowed the user to jump into other people's dreams, he took note of that and saved it for another day. He yawns again and looks at the time and sees it was getting pretty late. Guess I should turn for the night, Naruto says as he gets up from the floor and walks over to his bed. He changes into his PJs and prepares to sleep, turns off the light, and lies in bed. And he lies there, he thinks about the girls and how were they doing tonight. Hope the girls are okay. He asks himself, praying that they were alright as he falls fast asleep. If he stayed awake, for just a bit longer, he would have sensed a dark presence enter his room. It was the spider-like night terror monster, lurking in the room and spotting Naruto. Felt his mind, feeling how unstable it was, and it was perfect. It crawls to his bed and hovers over him, staring at him as his face starts shifting into an expression of pain and fear. Its eye glows at him, causing Naruto's head to move around while his eyes start twitching, unaware to him and the monster. A pulse of red energy goes off from Naruto's body and into the monster, causing it to roar with its glowing eye intensifying. Naruto's dream. In Naruto's dream, things were fine at the start. He was with the girls, chilling at the lake near Alfea, feeling things were going his way for once, but that all changed when the sky turned red and a loud roar above them, catching their attention. Naruto looks up and sees something that shocked him. He was a large red-orange long rabbit-like eared fox with 9 large tails. It stares at them with its ruby eyes with its teeth bearing out, snarling at them as it roars, sending a shockwave down at them and sending them flying back with Naruto losing consciousness after hitting a tree. After a while he slowly regains consciousness, hearing a loud ringing in his ears as he stands up from his spot, feeling his body all sore as he spotted injuries such as cuts and bruises with a large gush on his forehead with blood leaking out from the gush. He looks around for this monstrous fox, and his eyes widen at what he saw. The landscape had become a burning wasteland, all trees of the forest that were in Magix were in flames, the lake dried up and all life that was in it was dead, including the turtle, and the mountains were all flattened and destroyed with large trenches in between some of the mountains. Naruto could hear screams of horror and agony coming nearby as he turns to where the screams were coming from and was shocked at the sight for seeing Alfea being destroyed by the fox, stomping onto it while roaring out flames from its bloody mouth. He takes a step back in shock, but he trips over something on the floor, causing him to fall down to the ground. He sits up and looks at his feet, wondering and looking at what he tripped over on, and what he saw horrified him. It was a severed arm. While it was burning and barely recognizable, he could see paths of skin, tan skin, and the ring of solaria on one of the fingers of the hand. His face goes green as he recognizes that the burnt, severed arm was Stella's as he looks around, trying to see if he could find her and see if she was alright. He does, but what he sees was something out of a horror film or story. He sees the girls, or what was left of them. Each of the girls' remains was gruesome and spoke that they suffered before ultimately passing away. Flora's body was embedded into an uprooted and broken tree, stabbed through the chest by a piece of the tree. Tekna, her body was lying on the floor but her head was twisted the other way, showing that her neck was broken and her eyes were open and were dull, as blood was seeping from her mouth. Musa's body was crushed by a rock, only her arm and leg were sticking from under it. Stella's body was unrecognizable as her body was burnt to a crisp. The only use he could see that it was her was the stomp that was her missing arm and Bloom. She had a massive hole in her chest with blood seeping out from the large fatal wound. She coughs out blood, showing that while she was alive but barely, causing him to gasp, which she somehow hears as she turns to him and sees that he was fine. And Naruto, why? Bloom could barely utter as she looks at him with fear and a betrayed expression before she lets out her last breath and goes cold. Wah. Naruto only utters, confused about what she said before he hears another loud roar. He turns at the source and sees the fox staring at him with malice before it charges toward him. Naruto was defenseless as he just holds his arms up and prays that his death would be fast before the fox strikes him in the chest with its long nail, causing him to gasp. Blood flying out of his wound in his mouth as he looks at this fox with it looking down at him, and it roars at him, causing his ears to ring again and knocking him out once more. Where am I? Naruto says as he slowly regains consciousness. He starts to hear filtered noise while opening his eyes with bright lights hitting him, and he hisses from this as the noise started to get clear. Once his eyes had adjusted to the brightness as he sees a massive crowd in front of him, shouting at him while glaring at him with hatred and disgust. Demon, monster, abomination, murderer, royal slayer / fairy killer. The crowd yells at him, with crude and inhuman words, and throws various things at him, hitting his wounds. Naruto utter, very confused by what was going on. He tries to get up but he couldn't. He looks down and sees that he was wrapped around with large amounts of chains and restraints. As he looks at the restraints, the crowd continues to shout furiously. You caused this. All of this. Someone in the crowd yells, all those people. All the lives of those fairies. The royalty. You killed them all. You monstrosity. This person shouts before tossing a bottle at Naruto's head, hitting him as the bottle shatters against his head, which cuts him up again. Naruto cries out in pain from this as he looks at the crowd with tears forming in his eyes. And no, I didn't. I didn't kill anyone. Naruto yells, but this just angers the crowd further as they just continue to jab at them with angry words and snarls. He starts to cry, and one of the guards next to him sees this and is disgusted by the sight. Shut up, you beast, and face the families of those you killed. The guard yells before hitting the end of his spear onto the side of Naruto's side, which knocks him onto the floor and causes him to lose consciousness once more. Aw! Naruto screams as a brand was placed onto his skin. He and some guards were in a dungeon. Naruto was heavily restrained onto the wall of this dungeon while there were guards there, crudely laughing at him as he screams from the burning metal smoldering his skin. That's right, beast. Scream your heart out, just like all the ones you killed, be like them and feel what they felt. One of the guards yells before taking out a WHP and cracking the WHP onto Naruto's body, causing him to scream even more. This goes on for a bit until the guard stops his whipping and leaves Naruto alone. The blonde was panting as his hair was shadowing his eyes while BLD was lacking from the various wounds as Naruto speaks. Stop this, please, I'm begging you, leave me alone. Naruto begs with his voice weak and weeps, sounding broken and emotionless as the guard scoffs and whips him again. No, you don't deserve pity, forgiveness, or anything. You're a monster and one that needs to be put down. The guard says, whipping Naruto more as the blonde just took it, but he wasn't reacting to any of it. He just sat there, taking it as his eyes were still shadowed by his bangs. Leave me alone. Naruto repeats, his voice still sounding broken, but that was an undertone with it, something else. The guard stops for a moment, seeing that he wasn't reacting to the whippings, and gets angry. Never, you F monster. The guard yells, cocking his hand back with the WHP as he prepares to WHP it across Naruto's face. The blonde just sits there when red energy starts seeping coming from his body as his wounds start to close and heal. I said, leave me. Naruto utters quietly, and as the guard brings the WHP down with it about to hit Naruto, the blonde lifts his head up and his eyes were glowing red, alone. He screams and then, a large explosion goes off, taking all those in the dungeon in it as a pillar of red energy shoots into the sky. In the crater was someone in the middle of the pillar, standing as the bodies and skeletons of the guards were around the pillar and crater. The person in the pillar roars and sends out a massive shockwave that rips through the surrounding area. End Naruto's dream. The monster roars as Naruto tussles around in his bed, showing clear signs of pain as the camera moves into his face and to his eyes before they open to reveal red eyes with silk pupils as he stares at the dream monster. With the girls, on the campus courtyard. Where is it? Stella asks. She and the others were looking around the courtyard for this monster, wondering where it could be hiding. Don't know, but keep looking for it. It should be somewhere here. Musa says, looking around. Just as they do, they feel a large surge of pressure hit the air, causing them to fall from the air and land on their knees. Just brace against it. What is that? Tekna asks, arms shaking against the floor as she tries to fight the pressure. So much hatred. Flora whimpers, not liking this one bit. Musa and Bloom sense this pressure, feeling the anger and bloodlust with it. It feels like that night the party where Naruto went berserk with that. Bloom was saying before she stops as she and the others look at one another, having the same thought process as they came to one conclusion. Naruto was caught by the monster and went into berserk mode, just like that night months ago. Naruto! The girls shout. Did the monster get to him? Musa yells, now worried that Naruto was caught with this issue. I don't know. Stella shouts, just that. A loud explosion goes off nearby and the girls turn to it, seeing a large cloud of dust coming from the forest nearby the campus before hearing a roar in the distance. I think we got the answer to that. Bloom utters, now fearing for Naruto as she turns to the girls, come on. Let's go, we need to calm Naruto down. She says, with the others agreeing. They push their bodies in standing up, straining them a bit as they stood up and fly toward where the explosion went off, not aware that they were being followed. In the forest surrounding Alfea, it was indescribable violence and mayhem. A gray blur goes by, crashing and running through multiple trees and boulders before crashing into a cliffside and getting deeply embedded into the side, leaving a large crate in the wake of the impact. The monster lets out a loud screech of agony before a long red bubbly arm grabs it and removes it from the cliffside before tossing it up in the air. Something shoots toward it and intercepts it mid-air before the monster gets smacked by something hard and hot as its side gets badly burned by whatever hit it before it is sent back down to the ground, and impacting into it, creating a large crater, shaking the earth while causing the cliffside to crumble a bit. The monster roars from pain as it was bleeding, missing an eye from whatever was attacking it, and the thing that attacked it lands next to the crater, staring at it while growling. It was Naruto, crouching on his hands and feet, but he looked a lot different, just like that night. His hair looked wilder than before as the whisker marks on his cheeks were more rigid and darker, and his eyes were ruby red and silted to that of a cat's or something else, and his lips were black in color as fangs were sticking from his mouth. There was this strange red energy surrounding his body, looking like it was boiling due to the bubbles there were and the sound it was making as there was a tail made of this red energy behind him and two ears on top of this energy. Naruto sees this monster and growls loudly before he stands up and throws a punch at it, creating a massive wind gush which makes a trance in its wake as the wind hits the monster from its position and sends it flying back into the cliffside where it goes through it and emerging from the other side. Naruto chases away it on all four of his limbs. On the other side, the monster is still flying across the air as skids across the ground before crashing into it. It slowly stands up but with difficulty as its entire body was in pain from the assault it was put into before it hears something coming. It turns and sees Naruto running toward it, and in a panic, fires a barrage of green magical blasts at the blonde, but with quick react and speed surpassing the blasts, Naruto effortlessly evades them all as he leaps into the air and takes in a deep breath. Once he was in front of the monster, Naruto exhales and releases a wide-scale burst of flames from his mouth, catching the monster with it and he surrounding trees as they were set ablaze. The monster hisses out with pain from the attack as it jumps out of the flames and far from Naruto, who stops his flame breath and turns to the monster and sees it was severely burnt and injured. The monster tries to retreat from him by creating wings and tries to escape from this beast, but Naruto intercepts it by grabbing it with a red hand made of red energy and is brought down to earth once more as it screams from the hand, aggregating the wounds and burns it sustained from this one-sided battle. Just as the hand releases it, the monster gets up and looks at Naruto, who is just staring as he was stalking toward it, with this evil and feral glare from him as the monster just enraged by him and this battle, so much that it roars before charging toward the blonde with the intent of killing him, and as it reaches him and readies a blast, Naruto's claws shoot to it and into its chest. It screeched out loud from this as Naruto just looks at it with his red eyes. He growls and retracts his hand from the monster's chest, along with its heart, as the monster lets out one last roar before going silent and falls to the ground, laying there motionless. Naruto looks down at the hand that held the heart before tossing the organ down to the ground and roars himself, looking at the sky as the red energy spikes. Naruto. He hears a voice call to him as he turns to where it came from and sees the Winx flying over to him. They land on the ground as they see the massive destruction that was done to the landscape before turning to Naruto, who was growling at them while crouching on all four, ready to attack should they provoke him. In seeing this, Bloom holds out her hands to him. "Naruto, are you in there?" Bloom says, as calm as she could be, but she was utterly shaking and terrified at that moment due to what she was feeling coming from Naruto. "Naruto, it's us. Your friends." She asks before doing the unthinkable. She starts walking toward the feral boy. "Bloom. Where are you going?" Stella yells at her, seeing she was doing something crazy. "We don't want to hurt you," Bloom says, taking another step toward Naruto, but the boy just flashes his fangs at her. Growling. Naruto growls out, as a warning to Bloom should she try anything funny. Bloom hears this and knew she was stepping into dangerous territory, but she presses on with each shaking step. "Naruto, you know us. You know who we are and we know who you are. We know that you'd never hurt us, even if you're not in a great place. But we know you, so please." Bloom says as she stands in front of Naruto and looks at him with concern and sadness. "Come back to us, we don't like seeing you like this, we want our lovable friend back," she says as she holds out her hand to him. Naruto looks at the hand before he sniffs it as he looks back at her, and his expression changes from guarded to soft as he looked like he was considering her words. Just as he was about to do something, a ball of purple magic shoots toward the two and hits Naruto square in the face, causing him to get sent back, skidding and bouncing off the ground before crashing through some trees. "Naruto!" The girls yell. Just then a laugh was heard as they look up to the air and saw who was the one that was laughing. "Oh, I don't know about that Bloom. I like him as this." They see Icy there with Darcy and Stormy as she laughs into her hand. "Makes me all hot in seeing all this chaos and destruction," Icy says, smirking. "The tricks." The Winx yell. "Hello, fairies. Happy to see us?" Stormy asks. "Why are you here?" Tekna yells, glaring at them, but she stops as a realization came to her. "Wait, you're the ones who were behind that dream monster, haunting our dreams and causing all this to happen," she yells, causing the tricks to laugh. "Surprise. And we hope you all loved our present," Darcy says. "Why do this?" Musa yells as Icy just shrugs. "Oh, maybe because you're all weak and easy to manipulate for our amusement," Icy says. Just before even one could say anything else, the earth started to shake. Roar. With an ear-shattering roar echoing throughout the forest as trees broke apart or were uprooted from the earth itself, this causes all the fairies and witches to brace from the shockwave that came from the roar as Naruto emerged from where he crashed through from earlier as he crouches onto the floor, and glares at the tricks in the air. The three witches regained their balance in the air before looking down at Naruto and were shocked and impressed that he had not a scratch on him, let on was still standing. Whoa! That attack normally takes out its targets with one hit, but you managed to tank it and still stand. Not bad. But how would you like this? Vertigo. Darcy yells, conjuring a large ball of purple sound-based dark magic and firing it at Naruto. The feral blonde doesn't flinch or move when the Winx were shouting at him to move away from the attack as he does something that no one expected him to do. He lifts his hand up and swats the attack away from him, sending it to the side as it hits a tree and explodes, taking the tree it hit along with others in the explosion. He looks up at them, not fazed by the explosion as he just rips out another powerful roar, creating the earth around him to implode as this shockwave sends the tricks back further than they were. The Winx fortunately weren't that affected by the shockwave as it was aimed at the tricks mostly, but they still had to fight against it as the tricks were, but they were struggling against it. Eventually, Naruto stops his roar as the shockwave dissipates and the tricks were finally able to regain their control of flight. Whoa, okay, expect that, Stormy says, with a ring in her ears. She looks down at the blonde as purple lighting starts surging off her body. She looks at Naruto as she built the lighting up to her hands and lifts them, and aims right at the blonde. But let's see if you can handle this. She yells before firing 2 large bolts of lightning toward Naruto. Naruto doesn't move as the lighting reaches him and hits the spot he stood, causing a large explosion in its wake. Stormy stops her attack and looks at where Naruto stood, seeing a large cloud of smoke and dust filling the area and thinks that the attack connected. Ha! That should do it. Stormy yells, feeling that she got Naruto, but a swat from a red energy-made tail clears the cloud of dust and smoke and Naruto was okay, not affected by the attack as he just stood there, with the ground having a large black smudge on it. No way. How? She yells, in shock since that should have fired his nerves. Icy looks at this and while she was very impressed by this, and was really getting interested in this power, she needed him to be unconscious for their plans. So she floats forward. Okay, I've had enough with this. Icy says as her eyes glow bright blue as she pulls out her vacuum which amplifies her magic reserves tenfold as she stares at Naruto as she smirks. It's time that you chill. Heavenly Ice Prism. She yells, raising her arms up in the air. The ground underneath Naruto starts to shake, causing him to look down to see what was going as he sees the ground turn to ice before a large prism of ice erupts from the ground and encases him in it. The prism reached to where the Trix and Winx were in the air. As she sees the ice prism set and sees no immediate reaction from Naruto, Icy smirks and feels victorious over this win as she finally got her prize. She turns her attention to the Winx and was about to start attacking them to get to bloom when the ice starts to shake a bit, causing it to crack in some areas as pieces began to break off from the large prism. The shaking continues but gains more violent with more ice cracking and breaking off until the entire prism shattered into thousands of pieces, some still big while most were small pieces. And in the middle of the now broken prism, there stood Naruto, unfazed by the ice as the Trix and Winx were in awe and shock by this. No way. Icy utters with a shocked expression, that was her best and most powerful spell. It was an instant win, but to see someone wasn't affected by it, was shocking. Naruto just looks at them and growls as something happens to him. Behind him, the energy shifts and forms another tail as he crouches down before running up on an ice piece with his 4 limbs and leaps off it at great speed as he soars through the air, straight toward the Trix. Seeing this, the Winx panic. Naruto! Don't! The girls yell but it falls on deaf ears as Naruto continues soaring through the air toward the witches as he lifts his clawed hand up and was about to when. Sleep! A voice spoke as a blast of light magic hits Naruto in his face. This causes him to gain a sleepy expression as the red energy dissipated from his features and return back to normal right as he feels asleep and starts falling down, but he is fortunately stopped before he could fall further by a bright glow surrounding his body. This confuses everyone there as they see Naruto was calm and sleeping and wondered what caused him to be calm. Girls! The voice yells, causing everyone to turn to the source and sees Mrs. Farragonda. The Winx yell, with relief at seeing their headmistress flying toward them in her sleeping attire as she had her hand up with the palm glowing, showing that it was her who was holding Naruto in the air. She lowers her hand down and gently places him onto some grass before she turns to the Trix and glares at them. What do you 3 think you're doing? Farragonda asks coldly as she pulses out her magic reserves, causing a massive pressure to fill the air. The Winx felt it but the Trix felt the full blunt of it. It was pushing them down to the earth. You come to my school, cause mass destruction to our forests and most of all terrorize my students and this innocent young man. You 3 have pushed my buttons for the last time. Farragonda yells, summoning her magic to her hands as she was readying a spell to use against the witches. Seeing this and knowing just how powerful Farragonda was, especially since they spent a lot of magic on the dream monster, on their vacuums and battling against Naruto, the Trix knew that they'd lose and had to escape. Mon, let's get out of here. Icy stutters as she summons some magic as she and the others glow purple. Farragonda fires her blast at them but the trio barely evades it as they teleport away. Faragonda sees this and stops her attack, seeing there was no point in continuing it as she sighs heavily, angry at the trio. But she had to curse them later as she looks down and see the girls next to Naruto as they were checking up on him. She goes toward them. "Girls, are you all alright?" Faragonda asks, worried that they were hurt. "Why yes ma'am, tired and a bit drained magic-wise, but we're okay." Naruto too. Bloom says, and this causes Faragonda to sigh in relief. "Oh, that is good to hear. I was worried when I sensed a surge in power and felt it was Naruto." Faragonda says, happy that they were alright. But that happiness quickly fades as she looks at the sleeping form of Naruto. What happened, girls? What happened to cause Naruto to release that? She asks, wanting to know what did the witches do to have Naruto get triggered. The Winx look at one another before turning to. "We have an idea on what happened and caused him to go feral like that, the why part. We still don't know." Tekna says. "We'll explain back at campus," she says as Faragonda nods. They grab Naruto and carry him back to Alfea, along the way, seeing the aftermath of his battle with the now-dead dream monster, and were wondering one thing. Just how powerful is that side of Naruto? Unknown. That presence, that anger, that chakra, is it? A figure thought as they were meditating in a field. They'd been sensing this strange chakra for a while now, but it was too far for them to sense what it actually was, and only now was it enough for them to actually sense the chakra and get a feel to it, and what they were feeling was shocking them as they never expected to sense a tailed beast in this universe, ever. "It is." This figure thought as they let out a sigh. They knew that sooner or later, higher forces were going to sense this too and go from this chakra presence. They continue sensing where was this chakra and was surprised in seeing it was at the place her old friend ran. "Fairy of Light, where did you find Kurama?" They thought before turning their head up toward the sky and opening their eyes, looking at the sun. As their irises were enlarged and pale blue and there were no distinguishable pupils. Bloom's and Flora's shared room, Winx dorm Alfea, Magix. Wednesday morning. 2 days had passed since the night of Naruto's latest rampage due to the sinister antics of the tricks, and in the process of recovery since the night terrors had taken a toll on the girls' minds and bodies, and the same was said about Naruto as they hadn't heard from him in the past day or so. As usual, we find ourselves at Alfea, at our favorite heroine's dorm where Bloom was sleeping in her bed and she was beginning to stir awake as her eyes twitch a bit before opening and quickly snapping them close due to the blinding sunlight shining in the room hitting her face. Bloom slowly reopens her eyes as they adjust to the light and yawns as she could hear the faintest sound of music playing somewhere. She sits up from her bed and stretches before looking around her room and find her roommate wasn't there, only Kiko who was sleeping in his bed and Pumpkin Mirda who was on Flora's desk with her eyes closed, perhaps also sleeping. Bloom raises her eyebrow, wondering where was her roommate. Wonder where is Flora? Bloom thought. She yawns again and hops off her bed and puts on her slippers as she makes her way toward the bedroom bed, and while walking toward it, she pats her pet bunny's head, making him smile in his sleeping before also starting to wake up. Bloom exits her room and enters the dorm's lounge to find no one there as she had assumed, while the music she had heard was slightly clearer than before. Just wondering where everyone was and what was going on, she decides to go to where the music was playing. Following the sound, Bloom walks over to Tenka's and Musa's room where she opens the door and looks inside to not find Musa as she was expecting to, but finds Tekna inside, sitting by her desk while doing something on it as she wore a gray tank top with a pair of overalls as pants and had on a pair of black heavy-duty gloves while wearing a black hairband to keep her hair back as she was working. Bloom walks over to the tech fairy and sees she was building something as she was laser-focused on whatever she was building. She walks up to Tekna and taps her on the shoulder, hoping she'd gain her attention, but it doesn't work as Tekna was occupied by what she was doing. Tekna. Bloom calls out to the tech fairy, trying to gain her attention but had no result. She then starts moving Tekna more. Tekna. She calls to the tech fairy, but again, there was no result. Feeling frustrated by this and by the loud music as it was still early in the morning, Bloom resorts to her final tactic. She bends down to Tekna's ear level, takes in a deep breath, and Tekna shouts into Tekna, and this tactic seemed to work as Tekna jolts at the volume of the shout as she falls off her seat and onto the floor as she turns to Bloom. Bloom. What is it? What do you want? Tekna yells, rubbing her ear, the one Bloom shouted into. Turn the music down. Bloom yells, but Tekna looked confused. What? Tekna shouts, and Bloom places her hands to her mouth and shouts. Turn the music down. She shouts, and Tekna was able to understand what she was saying. Oh. Tekna says before she grabs a remote from her desk and turns the music down with it and turns back to Bloom. Sorry, guess it was a bit too loud. He, she sheepishly laughs, as she rubs the back of her head. So, what's up? Is there something you need? I wanted to know, where is everyone? Bloom asks, looking around the room. Oh, I can answer that. Tekna says. She gets up from the floor and straightens her work outfit before looking back to Bloom. Stella went to go into the city to go and do her weekly shopping spree, while Flora went to her garden to go and water her plants. She says. And Musa? Where's she? Bloom asks, wondering where was the musical fairy of the friend group. Oh, she's out looking for a job. Tekna says as she goes back to her desk and sits while processing back what she was working on. A job? Bloom asks, raising an eyebrow. Why is she looking for a job? Does she get her allowance from her dad? She asks, and Tekna shakes her head. No, that's not the realm reason. I asked her why, and she said that she felt like she needed to get one, to be more independent and responsible. She said that Naruto inspired her to go out and look for one since he has one in the city. Tekna says. Surprising Bloom. Oh, I see. Bloom says, surprised at that, seeing Musa becoming more responsible. She looks back to Tekna and sees what she was working on her desk. And you? What are you doing, since I can see you're tinkering with something? She says, and Tekna stops working on whatever she was tinkering with to turn to her. Oh, I'm just building an invention. Something that will help us. Tekna says. What is it? Bloom asks. I'm making a device that can let one enter the mind of another, and look over their thoughts, memories, and etc. I'm calling it Mindwalker 1.0. It'll help us with you and Naruto. Tekna says as she shows Bloom what was on the desk. It was a device that had two metal bands with the main device open, and many parts of it were spread out all over the desk. Bloom raises an eyebrow. With us? Bloom asks. Yes, it will help us finally figure out who this mysterious woman you've been seeing in your dreams, and it'll help Naruto regain his memories. Tekna says, and Bloom's intrigue and interest were piqued. Really? Bloom yells, and Tekna nods. Is it finished? She asks, hoping that the Mindwalker 1.0 was ready so she finally learns who this mysterious woman from her dream really was, but Tekna shook her head. No, it isn't yet. I still have to calibrate some systems here and there while making sure that the circuits won't fry if they're put under stress, and then it's simply running the power source so it won't blow up upon using it, and then there's more testing. Tekna says, unknowingly dashing away Bloom's hope. Oh, okay. Bloom says, looking down a bit, dejected after hearing that there'd be still many things that were left to do before the device would be ready. Tekna sees this and felt bad for making Bloom feel this way as she goes over to the red-haired and gives her a hug. Relax, Bloom, once I've got it up and running, we'll use it and finally get to the bottom of this once and for all. Tekna says. Bloom smiles at her friend's words as she wraps her arms around Tekna and returns the hug. Thanks, Tekna. Bloom says. No problem. Tekna says. The two stay in the hug for a bit before breaking it up as Tekna sits back down on her seat and resumes working on the device. So, speaking of our resident blonde. You know where he is? Bloom asks. He's in his room. I went to go and borrow some of his tools earlier while he was in there working out. Tekna says. And? Bloom asks as she sees Tekna momentarily freeze as a big blush appears on her face. No comment. Tekna mutters under her breath and resumes working on the device as Bloom wonders what she saw that made her blush. I see. Bloom says. Well, guess I should go and take a shower and get something to eat. I'll be back. She says and Tekna nods. Okay then. Tekna says and Bloom processes leaving her room to go to the dorm's bathroom to go and have her shower. Back in Tekna's room, she continues working on her device while thinking about the possibilities this could have in the field of psychology and in the medical field, and her thoughts go back to Naruto, as another big blush appears on her face as a rather recent memory flashes in her mind, causing the blush on her face to appear. I hope I can get this done soon. I really want to see if I can jumpstart Naruto's brain and have his memories return. Tekna thought as she shakes her head and focuses on the Mindwalker to get it ready. A few hours later. Lounge area Winx's dorm. A few hours passed and Stella and Flora returned to the dorm after completing their activities. Bloom was with them in the lounge as they spoke while Tekna was walking into the area, with a bathrobe that had a striking resemblance to her fairy form. It was a long-sleeved lavender-colored robe that fell to her thighs and it had powder blue lining around the hood, waist, and sleeve, and the legs with a green pattern around the wrists and the legs. She had taken a shower to get all the oil stains, sweat, and grime off her hands, arms, and face. She was drinking some energy drink as Musa enters the dorm with a happy expression, one that the others noticed. Ha! I did it! Musa yells, walking into the lounge and flops onto the couch, and sits next to Flora. What's up, Musa? What's got you all happy? Stella asks as Musa looks at her with a bright smile. Me? Well, I'm happy because this gal's got a job. Musa proclaims as she points at herself. You did? Bloom asks with Musa nodding. What is it? She asks, interested in what job Musa got. I got a job down at the library. Musa says. Really? Flora asks. Yup, I'm going to help Miss Barbadia sort out books that were hidden in an old basement at the library after some concreters messed up and broke down a wall there which revealed the hidden basement. I offered to help and she agreed to let me help. Her with pay and even letting take some of the books that could contain melodies I want to decipher. Well, congratulations Musa. I'm happy for you on you getting a job. Flora. Thanks, you guys. Musa says. Yeah. Me too, congrats. Bloom says, smiling at the musician as well. She soon adopts a thoughtful expression. Thinking about Musa and her new job and what it could do for her. Maybe I should go and look for a job as well. If you want, I could help you make a list of the potential jobs in the city that fit your experiences and preferred work ethics. Tekna suggests but Bloom just shakes her head. Thanks, Tekna, but you're already doing so much for me and I don't want to bother you too much. Bloom says before standing up from her seat. Instead, I'll go and look for one the old-fashioned way, by looking around and seeing if there's any help-wanted signs in town. She says, with determination in her tone and that fire in her eyes. Are you sure, Bloom? There was a report that it's going to rain in a bit. Flora says. True to her words, the weather outside was changing to be an oncoming storm. I'll be fine. But if it does rain while I'm out, I'll bring a raincoat and an umbrella with me. Bloom says. She exits the lounge and walks to her room to grab her things and rain gear to prepare for her job hunting trip in the city. But by the time she was out of her dorm and by the gate, waiting for the bus to the city, it started pouring down and it looked like it wasn't going to stop anytime soon. It might not be the best day to be walking around, but I can't wait anymore. I've got to find a job as sooner as I can and I've already marked down the places I think would work best on this map. Bloom thought, holding an umbrella in her hands, with a backpack strapped to her back while wearing a yellow raincoat. She soon sees the bus arriving and she boards it and takes her seat in front of an older man. Bloom takes off her backpack and pulls out a map from it and opens said map to reveal it had marks on it with various locations on the image of the city, and she looks over them. I'll start with the flower shop in downtown, and try my luck there since I have experience in working at a flower shop thanks to working for mom at her flower shop. I'll get a job, I'll get a job. She chants in her mind, determined to get the job, while nearly getting sneezed on by the older man behind her. The bus takes off and goes to the city where Bloom would begin her job hunting and maybe get a job on this trip. However, when she eventually arrived at the flower shop, luck wasn't on her side. Sorry, we're not hiring at the moment. The store owner says, completely denying Bloom's resume. What? Bloom says, in a brief moment of shock as she quickly got over it. Why? She asks, wanting to know why they were saying no. We don't need any salespeople. We're doing very well by ourselves. The store owner says, crossing her arms. I'm sure, but maybe on the weekends when there are a lot of people. Bloom tries to plead with the store owner on to let her work there, but the store owner wasn't letting up. There are never a lot of people here. We have a very select clientele, so again, we aren't hiring anyone now. The store owner says. Causing Bloom to be dejected and nods as she looks down. Okay, thank you for your time. Bloom could only say as she walks out of the store, but once she exits the door did her mood change from sad to annoyed. We have a very select clientele blah blah blah, dot. She angrily mutters under her breath. Her eyes briefly shifted from her blue to orange as she sees someone walk past her and was about to enter the store. I won't go in there, Mississippi. They select the people, she says as she walks away, leaving the woman who was about to enter the store utterly confused. Huh? The woman utterly. With Bloom, she had calmed down enough to stop at a bus stop so she could pull out the map again and cross out the first flower store off it and look at the next flower store in the city. The other store is on the other side of town. Let's just hope I'm luckier there. Bloom says as she put the map back into her backpack and starts running to her next location, hoping this one would be the one. However. I'm sorry, but I don't need a sales girl, my dear. There's even not much work for me. The store owner of this one says. Really? Bloom asks, shocked again that she was rejected from a job for the second time in a row. Nope, sorry my dear. The store owner says, actually looking sorry for the girl this time, unlike last time. You know, why don't you try the supermarket across the street? Maybe they'll hire you if you go and ask. He says, and Bloom was filled with hope once again. Oh, okay. Thank you. Bloom thanks the man before taking off from the store and to the supermarket to ask. But even at the supermarket. For a few hours a day. No way. We work hard all day, every day. Sorry. Try the pastry store at the corner. The manager at the supermarket yells, rejecting Bloom. And at the pastry store on the corner to the left. If you can't come in the morning to help prepare things at the store, then I'm afraid that I simply cannot hire you. Sorry dearie. However, if you like, you can have a cupcake on the house. The owner of the pastry store says, leaving Bloom dejected once more as she moves over to the last location on her map that she could try. Magix Cosmetics, the best cosmetic store in the city. But. You're too young, dear. We sell perfumes, not toys. The store manager yells, and Bloom had enough as she stomps out of the store and toward the nearest bus stop, calling it there since she's had enough disappointment for one day. Thanks a lot. Bloom grumbles out, while eating the cupcake she took from the pastry store as her eyes were glowing orange and were slit while she waits for the bus to take her back home. Wednesday. Professor Wizga's class Althea, Magix. Morning. The next day. Ishichu. Bloom sneezes into a handkerchief as she was in the middle of Professor Whizgiz's class with the leprechaun teaching a lesson. Let's see now how various substances can influence the transformation capacity. Whizgiz says, standing on his desk while holding a vial of potion in his hands. We can divide them into three main categories. The sweet ones, the bitter and dash. Bloom sneezes again, cutting Whizgiz off from his explanation as he hops off his desk and onto her desk and looks her in the eyes. Miss Bloom, if you continue with those, sounds. We will never get anything done today. You are distracting the whole class, and most of all, me. Whizgiz yells, making Bloom flinch while she wipes her nose. Sniff, I'm sorry sir, it's just, yesterday with the rain and I got wet from it, and I think I caught my cold from the man who was sitting behind me and, Bloom was saying, but she stops as she looked like she was about sneeze again, and Whizgiz could see it coming since he was literally in front of her. Wait. Don't. Whizgiz yells, trying to stop Bloom from sneezing, but it was too late. Shoo. Bloom sneezes and her sneeze was powerful enough to send Whizgiz flying off her desk and into his desk where he crashes into and spills over the potions that were on it and some spilling onto him. Whizgiz sits up from the floor and notices what was on the floor next to him and on him as his eyes widen in shock and horror. Oh no. The red cabbage apple infusion potion. I'm allergic to cabbage apple. Whizgiz yells, shooting up to his feet as the class looks at him in shock, wondering what was going to happen to him. It always turns me into a ton of disgust things. Whizgiz yells right as he disappears in a purple cloud of smoke that appeared from his body, and once the cloud had dissipated, there was a large green toad in his place, but it wore his hat. There. It's happening already. The toad yells as it sounded like Whizgiz as it was him transformed. Oh. The class utters. The toad form of Whizgiz turns to Bloom. I hope you have a very strong stomach, my girl. Because now you will have to kiss me. Toad Whizgiz yells, making Bloom's eyes widen in shock as she shoots up from her seat. What? Bloom yells in shock. Toad Whizgiz hops off the floor and onto her desk as he looks up at her. That is the only way to cancel the effect of the infusion potion. Toad Whizgiz says before letting out a croak. Bloom looks at him and gulps loudly. Oh, man. Bloom mutters, not liking that she was in this situation, especially since it involved kissing and she hasn't kissed anyone. Come on now, let us get this over with. Toad Whizgiz says as he turns his head to the side and lifts his cheek up to Bloom. Who again gulps and steers her nerves. Fine. Bloom says, knowing this was her fault and she had to fix it. So, she inhales deeply and peckers her lips to Whizgiz to kiss him, but just before her lips could even touch him, her nose twitches and ahchcho. She sneezes again with her sneeze hitting Whizgiz and another cloud of purple smoke appears around her and the desk. Once the smoke had dissipated, she and the rest of the class see Whizgiz had transformed again, but this time, he was a rather handsome rock star, once that made the rest of the class's eyes widen upon seeing him. What did I tell ya? From a big toad to a prince of rock. See, kissing works always. Rocker Whizgiz yells, hitting a riff from the guitar that had appeared with him when he transformed. Do we get to kiss you next? If so, I can do it. One of the girls in the class yells as she shoots up from her as hearts were in her eyes as Rocker Whizgiz nervously laughs while rubbing the back of his head. No thanks. That is not necessary. I feel that the infusion's effect is wearing off and I should turn back to normal right about now. Rocker Whizgiz says before he poofs into another cloud of purple smoke, and as it dissipates, he returns back to normal. Aw man, so close to kissing a hunk. The girl says, looking dejected at the missed opportunity as she sits back down in her seat. Whizgiz then turns to Bloom and gives her a disappointed expression. Next time, you should cover yourself better, Miss Bloom, or the better option, don't come to class when you're ill. Colds are bad for any and all type of magic Whizgiz was saying but looked like he was about to sneeze. Which happens as he flies back to his desk. The class looks at him and could see that he was looking to be getting ill. And Stella knew what he was about to say before he sneezed. And it's very contagious, is what you were about to say, right, Professor? Stella asks with Whizgiz sneezing again before nodding. Yes. Whizgiz utters as he sniffs his nose. Class is dismissed for the day, you can all go, I have to go and get some soup. He says to the class before he eventually poofs out of the room. Seeing that the class was over, the students exit the room and process down the halls of Alfea to go and do whatever their heart's longing. Bloom and the others were walking as she sneezes again into her handkerchief. Man, you really ran yourself into the ground yesterday. Did you at least find what you were looking for? Musa asks and Bloom just sighs and shakes her head. No, I didn't. It seems like no one in Magix needs help. Bloom gloomy says. That's not possible. Stella says, making the Earth Fairy look at her. Huh? What do you mean? No one I went to wanted help in their stores. Bloom says, confused about what Stella was on about. There's like hundreds of boys and girls from the 3 schools with a part-time job in the city who work to support their studies in case they can't afford some things from their school. If they can get a job, then there's got to be one for you too. Stella says, with the girls walking toward a bulletin board, which Flora spots something on it before ripping it off from the board as they continue to walk. Or maybe I'm the one who doesn't make a good first impression. Bloom says, looking down at the ground. No way. Maybe you haven't been aggressive enough, showing you were willing to fight for that job. Sometimes to get what you want, you've got to push and dash. What are you talking about, Stella? Bloom's a fairy, she can't act like a witch. Musa says, cutting Stella off. I know, but I'm trying to help her be able to get a job. She just needs to be more aggressive. Stella says. Or, all she needs is the right opportunity to come to her. Which so happens to be now. Flora says as the others turn to her. Look at what I found on the school's notice board. She says as she hands Bloom the thing she ripped from the bulletin board. Bloom takes the item and looks at it. An advertisement of a waitress offer. Bloom says, reading what was on the ad as she frowns, the white horse. What's that? She asks and Stella's eyes sparkle. Oh, I've heard about it. It's a place just outside the city by the lake, not too far from school. It's really popular with most of the citizens and the students of the 3 schools. Interdimensional travelers and tourists go there, and it even has a beach of sorts. Stella says. Okay, then it's a job as a waitress. How hard can that be? Bloom says while folding the ad into a small size and placing it in her pocket. Yeah. And maybe you'll meet a lot of cute boys there too. Stella says, nudging Bloom's arm with her shoulder while Musa just snorts. Stella, don't put ideas into her head. Bloom doesn't have time to be looking for a boyfriend, she's looking for a job. Musa says and Bloom nods. Yeah, I'm not really looking for boys there anyway. Bloom says, turning as a blush was forming on her cheeks, thinking about a certain someone. Speaking for which, Flora, how did you get that ad? Stella asks as Flora just nervously laughs as she rubs her arm. Well, I know we aren't supposed to, but I took it so that no one else here at school would go and take the job away from Bloom. Flora says, and this surprises the others. Wow, talking about acting like a witch. Didn't think you had it in you to do such a naughty thing, Flora. Stella says, smirking as Flora just blushes, embarrassed. Thank you so much, Flora. Bloom happily yells and hugs the nature lover who just smiles and returns the hug. Hee, no problem. Flora says. Well, looks like Bloom got an opportunity for a job. Which reminds me, I've got to get going to mine. Musa says. Really? Bloom asks. Yeah, got to start the cleanup of the hidden basement. Miss Barbadia really wants those books to be organized soon. Musa says. Oh, I see. Stella says. She then looks around and finally notices something or someone was missing. Where's Tekna? She wasn't in class today. She asks as the rest look around, and sure enough, they notice that their tech-savvy friend wasn't with them. Oh, she's in our room back at the dorm. She turned in her monthly sick day so that she could work on her device in peace. Musa explains, making the rest think about Tekna and how she was doing. Oh, well, I hope she's okay. Flora says, worried for Tekna. Yeah, I hope so too, she was up all night. Musa says as she had heard some commotion from Tekna. During the night and all. Well, I have to go and see if I can get the job. Bloom says as she starts running toward the gate, to go and catch the next bus to the city, to go and get some medication for her flu, and to go to the White Horse. I'll see you guys later. She yells. Bye Bloom and good luck. The trio of girls yell to Bloom, wishing her the best of luck. Tekna's and Musa's shared room, Winx's dorm Althea, Magix. Noon. In Tekna's and Musa's shared room, she was by her desk, which was filled with various dirty tools and some cans of energy drink, and bits of leftover, looking at a laptop that was hooked by to the now completed prototype of the Mindwalker as it was running diagnostics, making sure that everything was working perfectly. Nearly there. Tekna utters under her breath as her red eyes were watching the diagnostics runs. There were bags under her eyes as she was up all night working on the device, hoping that it'd work. And to her surprise and relief, the diagnostics had been completed and showed that the Mindwalker was fully running and stable. Yes. Finally, I'm finally finished with the Mindwalker. She cheers, standing up from her seat and throwing her arms in the air, finally done with it and could get the show on the road. But there were still a few things left to do with the device. Now all is to test run it, but Tekna says as she realizes that she really didn't have anything or no one to test run it on. She had no idea where the others were out of class since she wasn't there in the first place, plus she really didn't want to test it on Kiko since she really had no idea if it could work on animals, and the same thing could be said with Mirta. She starts to think of a solution to this issue. What could she do? Maybe, I should skip the test run and do a real run with Naruto. Tekna says as she places her hand on her chin and starts thinking about that. I mean, it is a good idea to do it, but I have no idea if it'd even work on him as well, since one he isn't a fairy or a magical person, if I have to be honest, since we really don't know what he is. And there's that possibility that it'd even work and not fry our brains, or merge them. She thought as she weights the pros and cons of doing this. She looks at the device on her desk and sighs, knowing that there was only one thing to do in this. Guess there's only one true way to find out. She says as she walks over to the device and grabs it to go down the ladder in the secret entrance to the underground tunnels and to Naruto's room to see if he was there. Naruto's cave. Althea, Magix. Noon. Naruto was in his room, by his work desk, as he had his hand above it and was shaking while sweat dripped down from his head. The reason why he was like this? He was working on a new rune seal and was attempting to add the finishing touches on a highly unstable part of the rune, as he felt that should he mess up or miscalculate the part in the wrong way to it, it'll blow up and 3 weeks for work would be down the drain. Steady, steady. Naruto mutters, as he slowly and steadily his hand holding the magic inked brush to the paper with the nearly completed seal when. Knock. 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 Naruto. Are you in there? He hears a voice call out from his door, and it sounded like Tekna as he turns to the door with a confused expression. Huh? Naruto utters, and doesn't see that he actually swipes the brush across the seal, ruining it as it starts to profoundly glow, which catches his attention as he looks down and sees the seal glow and begins to flash rapidly. His eyes widen as he realizes what he just did. Oh no. he utters right before the seal lets out a bright flash that consumes the entire room. Outside of his room, Tekna stood by his door, knocking on the metal door, hoping that he was in the room when. Boom! A violent explosion went off inside the room, shaking the walls of the tunnel as she takes a step back. Naruto? What happened? Are you okay? Tekna calls out, hoping that Naruto was okay and not hurt. Naruto didn't respond and Tekna starts getting worried. Naruto? Tekna calls to him again. And again, there was no respond. Naruto? Tekna says, concern really appearing on her exhausted face as she hoped that the explosion didn't kill the blonde. There was no response again from the room, and just as she was about to call out to him, the door suddenly opens and her eyes widen as Naruto appears, covered head to toe in various bright paint as he looked defeated. Tekna. Naruto mutters, seeing the girl in front of him as he looks at her with a deadpan expression. Naruto? Tekna says, concerned about seeing him in this state. Is there something you needed? Naruto asks as Tekna flinches. Did I interrupt something important? Tekna quietly asks. Yes, you did. Naruto says, causing Tekna to flinch again. I'm so sorry. Tekna says as she looks down. Naruto looks at her for a bit before sighing, knowing that it wasn't really her fault for this, since how was she supposed to know that he was working on something fragile and slightly unstable. It's fine, that was a chance I was going to mess anyway. Naruto utters as he turns around and looks back to his room, at his desk where there was a large splat of paint on it and on the floor while black smoke was coursing off from the middle of the desk. He sighs and turns back to Tekna. So, what's up? He asks, wiping the paint off his face. Oh, is it okay if I could come in and talk to you about something? Tekna asks as Naruto looks at her for a bit. Sure, you can take a seat by my lounge area while I go and get cleaned. Naruto says before opening the door wider and stepping aside to let her in. Thank you. Tenka thanks Naruto as she walks into his room and he closes the door soon after. It's no biggie. Naruto says. With Bloom. Stop 32, just outside of Magix's city next to an IDWG interdimensional wrap gate. Here, this is it. Stop 32. A bus comes up to a stop just outside the city as Bloom and another woman exit it. The white horse is right down this street. You can't miss it. The woman says, pointing down the road as Bloom smiles at her. Thank you. You've been big help. Bloom says with the woman smiling back at her. No problem. Good luck with your job hunting. The woman says as she leaves. Bloom had asked her for directions to the white horse and why she was going there to the woman while they were on the bus. Thank you. Bloom says as she waves to the woman. She soon starts walking down the road while looking for a building that matched the image on the flyer. Okay, so she said that it'd be down this street. She says. She walks down the road a bit further until she sees something up ahead. After taking a few more steps, Bloom realizes what was up ahead. And there it is. She yells as she starts running toward what she was seeing and stops in front of it. She stood in front of a large round building, with terraces in height, accessible via stairs. The restaurant's colors were similar to Alfia's, light pink and blue, with an almost purple pink and yellow. Its logo was a white horse on a blue hexagon, almost in the shape of a diamond on top of the building and on the side of it. Whoa, it's a lot bigger than I thought it'd be. Bloom says as she admires the building's design and size. Soon, she felt nervous creeping in as her mind flashes back to the previous day's failures. She thought that the same would happen here, but she steers her nerves. But if this is where I can finally get a job, so be it. She yells as she smacks her cheeks, in an attempt to hype herself while taking in a deep breath, and walks into the restaurant where she sees an older woman by the register, filing her nails. The woman has black wavy hair with white streaks, particularly the hairs near the temple and her bangs. She had a pale complexion and gray eyes. Bloom walks up to the register as the woman takes notice as she looks at Bloom with a smile. "Good afternoon, welcome to the White Horse, home to the white chocolate milk tart. Are you here for dining or takeout?" The woman greets. "Good afternoon. And sorry, I'm not here to eat. My name is Bloom and I came here in response to the ad. You have a job opening here?" Bloom asks. The woman blinks for a bit before her eyes widen slightly as she remembers. "Oh, dearie, yes. Bloom was it?" The woman asks as Bloom nods, confirming that was her name. "Well, the flyer is ours and we do have a job opening for waiters for the weekends. It tends to get busy here during the weekends and holidays and we're currently understaffed." The woman says as Bloom looks surprised in hearing that and smiles brightly. "Only on the weekends? That's fantastic." Bloom happily cheers as the woman raises an eyebrow. "What? Afraid that you'd be working too much?" The woman asks as Bloom blinks and frantically waves her hands at the woman. "Oh no. It's just that I have to study on other days, but if it's only on the weekends, I can do it with no problem." Bloom explains. "Studying, huh?" The woman asks as she takes a closer look at Bloom with narrow eyes and realizes something about her. "You're a student at Alphea, right?" She asks as Bloom blinks and nods slowly. Yes, I am. I'm in my first year." Bloom says, hoping that this fact wouldn't jeopardize her chance at the job. She was expecting something but she wasn't expecting the woman to laugh. "Ah, Alphea. Boy, does that take me back." The woman says as she laughs a bit more before turning back to Bloom. "Why, I was a fairy too, you know. Back in my youth, but that was a long time ago and I don't remember anything from that time." She says, and Bloom's curiosity was piquing at hearing that. "Really?" Bloom yells as the woman smiles and nods. "But why are you working here now?" She asks, curious about why she was here instead of being in her home world like most fairies would be as the woman drops her smile. "Because I didn't find anything better to do, little girl. And I didn't have time to be wasting all that silly magic which you are so proud of." The woman says. "Oh." Bloom utters, surprised in hearing that. She hears a chuckle not too far from her as she turns and sees a man with blonde hair, wearing a suit with a pair of shade with orange lenses. Actually, the owner is highly allergic to magic. She can't be near it. "Why do you think we're out here instead of in the city? Remember that. Don't use too much magic near her or she'll break out." The man says, causing the woman's eyes to widen as she turns to him. "What are you talking about? Don't go around and spread lies." The woman yells, as the man laughs and walks away into the kitchen as the woman just sighs and turns back to Bloom. "Ignore him, he's a bit of an idiot," she says as Bloom nods. "I'm sorry if I made you angry, I didn't mean to be rude," Bloom says, looking apologetic. The woman looks at her for a bit before she sighs. Well, you seem genuinely sorry for that, I can tell." "Well, I guess I can forever you," the woman says. "Thank you so much, miss," Bloom says, but the woman holds her hand up. "My name is Greta dearie. Being called miss makes me feel older than I am already," the woman says, now known to be Greta. "Oh, okay." Bloom nods. "I see that you want the job, right?" Greta asks and Bloom nods again. "Unfortunately, everyone wants something and there's two more here, also here trying to get the job opening," she says, causing Bloom to be confused. "Huh?" Bloom says as Miss Greta points to her left and Bloom turns around and sees two other girls sitting by a table. She looks at the girls and instantly recognizes they were from Cloud Tower, meaning they were witches. The two witches look at Bloom and smirked at her, making a message to her that they were going to challenge her for the opening. "Oh," she utters, now seeing that she had to fight for her chance at the job. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 9. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Pixel's fanbook on fanfiction.net. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.